Sure. Anyone object? All right, so let's call this work session to order. I see that we are recording. Welcome, everyone. And we're gonna, well, we're supposed to do issues and updates, but not everyone's here, I guess, but we'll hope they get here by the time we're finished. Emerson, do you have any updates for us?
No, Mayor, I don't.
David?
Nothing, Mayor.
So much for people getting here. Sarah?
I can say a little bit about the Old Orchard Business District meeting that we just had. There's been some concern lately about pedestrian safety in that area, and mentioned that that's a hot topic around other areas as well. So I think you're going to see a little more engagement from a couple of the business owners there, maybe on some of these conversations we're having around improvement for crosswalks and signals and things, in particular, just right around the businesses there in Old Orchard. So, but it ties also into that Murdoch and Laclede Station kind of intersection too, and all of that. So I thought that was an interesting correlation to kind of things that we're talking about elsewhere.
Yeah, and I've been copied on some emails that the county is doing some sort of study and making some
good.
changes. So I'll try and remember to forward that to you.
Thank you.
And that way you'll know what's going on.
And that's all I've got.
All right, Pam?
Hi, yes, Sustainability Commission met yesterday. And they listened to a presentation by two representatives from Ameren to discuss their EV charging incentive program. So Ameren presented all things about electric vehicles and the various types of charging stations. They are providing grants from $5,000 per charging station to cover procurement and installation. So Todd will be applying for those for the commission. They are starting to meet with a municipal consortium to help pool knowledge and resources on sustainable practices in our community. And then finally, they're working together to pull together the priorities for Forever Webster Groves presentation that we will see in October. And then VDC will be meeting on Thursday.
Great, thank you. Emily?
Hi, yes. So I had Green Space meeting on the 12th, and they just had an event this past Saturday with planting trees in the right of way at homes. That was a big success. So congratulations to them for that work. They have several other events in the planning coming up regularly. They have things planned for Make a Difference Day, which is October 22nd. So if people are interested in volunteering, there are things out on the, what's it called? Greenskeepers. Yeah. Different volunteer opportunities to help at Rui Park, at Deer Creek, at a couple other spots, Ivory Crockett as well. So that's what's going on with Green Space. I know this is going to be covered later in the meeting as well, but one thing that came up as part of that was Yvonne mentioned the bird sanctuary at Blackburn Park and how they've expanded it by 2 acres, and they planted 101 new trees. They had Boy Scouts that needed to plant 100 and then a Girl Scout who needed to plant 1. So they have 101 new trees, which I just think is really great for our green space and all of that stuff. So that was Green Space. And then Historic Preservation also met. They are working on putting together a public information center meet session around Lustron homes and some work around that. So that we should have letters going out soon-ish, and then that meeting will be in November.
All right, thank you very much. Katie, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Neil?
I have no report.
Marie, I think you have a thing or two for us here.
Oh, Mayor, I think I'm going to disappoint you.
No?
Well, there's several updates, but most of them are going to be covered in our discussions later. So to be expedient, I will save them when we have the flood and the other items.
All right, then.
Mayor, one real quick thought. I'm out of town and my internet's kind of spotty, so just keep an eye on me, make sure I don't disappear.
All right, thank you.
Just briefly, Mayor, from my perspective, very big thank you to city staff
and all the volunteers in our community for a very successful Jazz Fest this weekend. It was a remarkable success and heard really good reviews from the business community as well about the success they had as a result.
Terrific. Thank you. I just have a couple of things. I, along with Commander Jillian McCoy, participated in the Safe Kids, Healthy Communities initiative that is going on with, in conjunction with the school district. The idea is, as a community, how do we meet the issues of child abuse earlier and make ourselves a safer community rather than addressing the problems after they happen? The boards and commission subcommittee met. I think you've got those notes at some point. I think we're making progress and hopefully have a proposal here relatively soon. And then the St. Louis Municipal League Legislative Affairs Committee met, and we're going to meet again on tomorrow. But one of the things that we've talked about is that they are putting together a proposal to go back and do some work on the home-based business legislation that passed, and just try and fix it a little bit. So we actually do have some say in understanding how those businesses work. And I think that is it for me. I'm going to put you on the spot, Karen. Do you have any updates?
I don't have anything from the planning commission. Parks and Rec is very busy. And there were just conversations around what they're doing to try to manage the cutting around the city and what have you. Really interested. They're working with Gateway Greening. They're going to renovate the park at Big Ben and, well, where McDonald's used to be.
Oh, Gazebo Park.
Yeah. And so they're
No,
working.
No.
Vermont, no.
Deer
Oh,
Creek,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
yeah.
right. On the
McDonald's.
Maplewood border there.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have about 600,000 budgeted for the improvement, and Webster had 250 for capital improvements, but it wasn't earmarked for this. But we don't really know what that's going to look like yet, but they're working on it. And then also working with, I think, the sustainability and green space to see what type of projects they may be able to come up with to do some activities, some volunteer activities across the city.
Great, thank you very much. I skipped over reviewing the regular agenda. So if anyone has anything that we need to review on the regular agenda, now is the time to speak. David, I can't tell whether that's somebody's, you don't, yeah, okay, that's the mouse, okay. I thought you had your hand up, David, and I didn't know how that was working, but okay.
No, don't worry, I'll shout.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. So I think we can move on to our topics for this evening, and we have with us our Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Scott Davis, who is going to talk about turf maintenance around the city. Thank you.
2 seconds here, Scott. There you go, it's yours.
Thank you.
And when you want the Google Earth, just tell me.
Okay. Thanks. Good evening. So here tonight to discuss some of the ways that we can look at how we're doing our operations a little bit different around the city, inside our parks and our rights of way and our islands, specifically with the areas that we're mowing turf grass. I've got a series of recommendations to provide to the council and get your input and hopefully approval on. But give you a little bit of background. A lot of the areas previous to this budget year that we've mowed have been contract mowed, and we've paid about $77,000, $78,000 a year to have some of that contract mowed. We removed that out of the budget for this fiscal year. So now we're mowing those areas in-house through the parks. Between that and the parks and everything else that we were already mowing, it's quite a bit, and we need to find some ways to gain some efficiencies, be a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more fiscally conscious, and just reduce some of that labor on staff to do. So kind of the first recommendation, the easiest thing, and we've already begun doing it, is in our parks, increasing our riparian zones along our creeks and stuff, making those wider, providing more native habitat for our plant species and our animal species in town. That also reduces the amount of mowing that needs to be done. Specifically, that's Shady Creek Nature Sanctuary, Lorraine Davis Park, the Deer Creek Greenway, and Deer Creek Park. We're also just increasing some of our no-mow areas in the parks, specifically behind Barnacle tennis courts, between the tennis courts and the railroad tracks. Councilmember mentioned the bird sanctuary in Blackburn Park. We've increased that quite a bit, a couple acres, turning that back into more forested areas for the bird sanctuary. So things of that nature where we can reduce some of our mowable land and still provide good services for those parks. So we're already doing all that stuff, and it's being pretty well done. The next items are more the right of way and the islands and such. In the memo, next one over. There we go. I gave you a series of maps. These were the mowing maps that our contractor has used for the last several years. The items in, I believe that's yellow, could be green. I'm colorblind. Whatever color that's shaded was a mowable area that our contractors took care of. So on each one of those maps, I made a recommendation at the top of what would happen on those maps. Many of them are parks, and our park staff will just mow them. For instance, this is Memorial Park where the rec center's at. Our contract mower had mowed everything except for the ball fields. We've always mowed all of our ball fields, but they've mowed a lot of the hillsides and random places like that. So park staff will continue to mow all those. But then when you get down on this next edge, I'll slide down one more. This is the interchange with MoDOT. Most of this is MoDOT property in here in the middle. We did reach out to MoDOT, and last week they actually agreed to put it on their mowing list again for next year. They've already got contracts out this year, but they said that let them know what we would like them to mow again, and they would continue to pick that up for next year. So a lot of that colored area there will be picked up by MoDOT next year. However, all this area right along the edge here of Elm Avenue, you can actually see that we're mowing actual properties right now. And that's something that the city shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be going on actual residents' properties and mowing their properties. So that's a recommendation that we need to not mow any private property. And the way the current code and ordinances are written, any property is supposed to mow up to the curb line or the adjacent property outside of their property line, and remove any weeds, turf grass, and such. So in this instance, these two properties right in here almost come all the way down to Elm Avenue already. By code, they should mow all the way down to the curb line of Elm. Same thing with the school district over here. They're currently mowing this space right in here. They should also by code be mowing some of this space over here. There are about between 17 and 20 properties throughout the city that I have found that should be mowing up to the curb line per the code. Those are all listed in here. Several of those are like these on Elm here. There's some along Avenue A towards the very south end of town, right behind Walgreens, and a few other ones. That is definitely going to be something that homeowners probably aren't going to love to hear. Our hope and goal is to provide each individual property owner that's going to be affected by this recommendation with a map showing exactly what they would need to be required to mow. That'll come with a letter from city attorney, and myself will draft a letter and send that out to each one of them with that map, letting them know.
Why were we initially mowing it?
That's a good question, Councilmember Franklin. Many of these properties have been mowed longer than I have worked for the city, almost a decade now. We've picked up various properties throughout the times even that I've been here, areas that aren't getting mowed for whatever reason by a property owner, by a sliver of right of way, whatever it might be, that's not getting covered. And ultimately, a lot of times that'll come through City Hall, through the planning department. They're the ones that normally get those phone calls. And after a while, they'll ask us if we can go out and cut them. And then it just kind of evolves and ends up on our mowing list.
Look at that. Answer your question and then he appears.
I don't know if we need to go through every single one of these slides unless council would like to. There's 20 or so of them. This is Lockwood Median. Our recommendations on the medians is that we would continue to cut all of the medians in town. We may look to make some of these into some more no-mow areas, have some more of them be ends of them or smaller ones be more wood chipped. A lot of them already have landscape beds that are wood chipped on the end and may have a few plantings in them. If we can increase some of those spaces, we may, but we'll continue to mow all these long medians in town.
Okay, before you continue through all of this, what's council's preference? Do you want Scott to go continuing through these maps, or do we have specific questions on some of these things?
I have some questions, but I don't know if everybody else wants to. I don't, it took a long
Okay.
time to go through them all when I was
Yeah.
getting ready for today.
What do you all? How about this? Let's start with some of the questions rather than scrolling through, and that
Absolutely.
may cover it, because I have a few questions too, but Sarah, why don't you go ahead?
First, is this a comprehensive list of all the lots that are being mowed that kind of fall into this category of medians or like right of way kind of lots? Or is this just the ones where there's recommended changes?
This is a pretty comprehensive list. These are all the ones that were done by our mowing contractors.
Okay,
They had most of our right of way medians and islands and such that they mowed. It was easier to have them go do it than it was for our staff to do it. So it's a pretty comprehensive list. There were some spots that Parks staff was already doing. Parking lots at Log Cabin Lane and some of the business district parking lots and things of that nature, and a few other real tiny spots. I believe there's a little bitty end cap at like Rock Hill and Helfenstein that's not included on here. It's pretty much all planted out. There's about 3 foot of turf grass or something like that on that one. But so it's a pretty comprehensive
okay.
list.
Because I was just kind of curious what went into the decision for these particular, especially the ones that will impact homeowners, kind of which, like how were those selected? But if it's all of the ones where, because I do think we've heard from one homeowner, and so I assume that some kind of notice has been sent out already.
So several homeowners have contacted myself and some of you all throughout the last couple months since this has gone into effect. When we stopped having contract mowers, they mowed 1 week into July on last year's money. So since then, we've been trying to maintain them all. So a few homeowners have called and talked to me or someone else, and I haven't really let this out of the bag, but some folks are, I've informed them what the code says and that we're trying to maintain them, but there may be changes.
I
down
do
the
think
way.
there's a wide variety of sizes of the space, especially when you consider it kind of relative to the land that's adjacent to it that the homeowner owns. And I do question maybe where we're offering to have a property discussion and where we're just saying you have to mow. Like, I don't guess I understand kind of what the difference is on some of those, because in some cases we're saying, we'd like to talk to these homeowners about possibly taking ownership of this lot is my assumption, but that's not true for every lot. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a couple that I put down at the end that were in North Webster that are actually officially lots. They have lot numbers and
Okay.
addresses, which is different than just right of way adjacent to a property between the street line.
Okay,
So those were the ones that I said we need to talk to the homeowner specifically, about what we need to do with that actual parcel number next to the household.
okay. And
Um,
I am curious about the ones where that's not the case, if that's an option also, because it does seem like maybe it would be to both of our benefit if that property was owned by a homeowner. But I don't know. Maybe that gets into more specific examples, and I don't want to monopolize this whole conversation like I'm doing. right now.
No, keep going, keep going. It's,
I have the same point on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
something.
that's something that we're researching right now. Neil's helping me out with that. Mara's been helping me out with that a little bit. We're talking with county to determine, a lot of times when you see these lot lines on the maps or on our GIS maps, they're not necessarily the exact lot line. Oftentimes the property actually extends past those lot lines and it may go all the way to the middle of the roadway. And then the roadway is just an easement sitting on top of that. So we're trying to drill down and get absolutes on all those, because some of this area may already be officially part of the parcel, and the property that's adjacent to it might not actually be right away. It might be part of the parcel with an easement overlay that we've been mowing and maintaining the easement around the streets.
Yeah, I would be interested to know more about that as you kind of get farther with it, because I do see the concern, and I kind of identify with it, on a couple of these examples, at least, that's a good extra chunk of mowing that's needed now that was never kind of.
And some of
required
it's hard
or
mowing, and some of
needed.
it's hillsides
Yeah.
and such, which is why we never mowed it in-house. It was the contractors have better specific equipment to do that with. So
Right.
some of those are difficult or larger lots. I agree with you.
But going
Some
to
of the-
David's original question of why were we doing this? We don't know who started it, but we've done it. And so there will be people who will say, well, traditionally you've done it. Why would you stop now? Well, because our budget mandates that we stop now. So what we're trying to do is figure out those lines. And Scott's done a great job of identifying all those properties, which include things like paper streets, things that we've declared as streets that have never been used as streets, but that we're still recognizing as a street by mowing what might be a street someday, but never will be. So we're figuring out those lines, and then we're going to, in as kind of way as possible, let the homeowners know whose land was never taken. This is still yours. It's your responsibility, and hopefully pull back from some of this. And then there's the other lots, which are actually identified as lots, which we're going to go through and see what we can do about talking to adjacent landowners to see if they want to absorb that into theirs. Takes it off our list, puts it back on the tax rolls,
Right.
and we're not cutting it.
Right.
So it makes sense. And Scott's approach has been terrific in terms of figuring out all these things. It's going to make some people unhappy though. So
A couple things that I've thought of are the islands. I know on Clydehurst, for example, they take care of their island as a neighborhood that's part of their circle. And I did not find that on the list. It also seems that some of these can be planted more. I mean, that's the purview of the Green Space Advisory Commission, is to take care of these public, the easements and the right of way. And so I would think that possibly they could absorb maintenance, some of these, especially of the more difficult areas along the railroad, et cetera.
When you say they could absorb, who do you mean by they?
The commission,
Okay.
and which is ultimately parks. I
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
but I mean, they're usually planted so that they're not turf grass and need to be mowed anyway. They become plant material that's, more native and can be, is on a more natural seasonal cycle.
Yeah, I think
Um,
green space could help with that. Like if we identified ones we wanted to
Yeah.
turn into no-mow, they could help with like what should be planted there, but they're not gonna be able to help with them like maintenance. of
Correct.
it.
Actually, I
they-
talked to one of the green space owners today, and they actually offered to do the maintenance, that
Oh.
they would help provide maintenance. They'd get they'd help talk to the neighborhood groups about, do
Yeah.
individual neighborhoods want to take ownership of this island and do the maintenance on it, or can the green space do it, or can we get it as part of one of our volunteer programs so that someone can go out and take care of it? And that is something that one of the recommendations on these islands was that we would go talk to those surrounding households around this island
That's what- yeah.
before we just went in and
Right.
did whatever we were going to do. If there's, 2 or 3 homeowners that would like to see it in turf and would like to continue to mow it, we'll figure out some sort of way to do a 1-year agreement or something, so that they
Mhm.
can, say they'll mow it for the year, and then we can, either write that so it just turns over and keeps going, unless either us or them say they don't want to do it again, at which point then we'd look at wood chips or something else. But I
So-
think there's definitely ways to do that.
So
Yes.
and then that was the next question, was about converting turf grass to wood chips. It sounds like, does that mean there's nothing there already? Would we plant that with trees or something more substantial so it doesn't become just a weed infested area?
Yeah, it
or-
really depends on what's already there. A lot of the islands already have stuff like that. And then at the end of my background, I tried to go and find a bunch
Yeah.
of other islands in surrounding communities. I've got 2 islands in my neighborhood, and both of them are wood chipped. One of them has a tree on it, and one of them has some flowers and some
Okay.
landscaping and
So
some
it wouldn't just
variety.
be
So
only wood chips?
it could be, and even do all these islands, although our recommendation is to have a no mow, we can't go do this all this winter. We won't have time to do all this. So it'll be a process that'll go through, and we'll talk to the neighbors to find out if anybody wants to maintain it. If they don't, then we'll start converting some of them over to no mow, but it's going to be a process to do that. And it may not happen by growing season next spring, next summer. It's maybe a 2-year process to
So it
convert
sounds
all
like it's
this.
just a lot of working out with all the individual cases and
Yes.
locations.
So, I mean, what's the largest lot? Excluding the ones that might be adjacent lots, like full adjacent lots, what's the largest lot that we're gonna make homeowners mowed out?
There's probably 2 largest ones. One's at Rock Hill. Let's see if I can find it. I'm gonna make this smaller so I can scroll faster. I will get there.
Like
This one is a fairly large one.
That's one.
This is 604 West Glendale. So the end of this peninsula, I guess would be the right word for that, is what's that say? Just under 1/10 of an acre. So that's that's not a tiny piece.
Explain to me, who owns that?
So that's what we're trying to drill down to and find, because like I said, these lot lines aren't necessarily the exact lot line.
So we think one of two things, either somehow somebody adjusted and it would belong to the homeowner who's adjacent to it because it's a non-buildable lot. Or the second is a lot of these are subdivisions. And when you platted the subdivision, what they did was they created land that was common ground that was supposed to be kept by the subdivision. This was long before we had zoning rules and regulations, or we had any kind of enforcement for cutting grass and that sort of thing. And it just sort of became the tradition that it was the subdivisions. And then when it became part of the city, it seemed to evolve into our responsibility to cut it. But I think that if we're able to get the deeds, and that's what we're trying to do, is get these deed lines, we're going to see that it belonged there, or we're going to have a subdivision plat, which is going to say, this belongs to the subdivision.
Mhm.
And that isn't the city of Webster Groves. That's the 20 homes that are in the subdivision.
They have to figure it out. Is there any interest in wanting us to keep this? Like, let's say that it wasn't our land, but we've been open and obvious for 20 years, 10 years or whatever. Do we want this land? I mean, is there anything that you recommend that say, hey, Webster really should keep this either for flood purposes or?
So I have talked with many of the other directors, planning, public works, fire. We're kind of all in the agreement that most of these are non-buildable areas, right of ways. There's not need for, like this one specifically, we're not going to increase the street so that it's 80 yards wide or whatever it is. So public works really doesn't have a need for that right of way. It's not really serving any sort of flood mitigation purposes or anything like that. So in this case, no, I don't think so. Now there's several buildable lots that we can look at in a little bit. And I think those buildable lots ought to be done something greater with, sold for buildable houses or such. But a lot of these smaller
I'm
little
looking
thin
at-
folks, no.
It's on page 31 of mine, but it's the Fieldcrest and Grant.
I don't have what you're saying.
You're almost there.
Up or
Keep
down?
going down. Keep going down.
1400 block grant.
Got it, Scott? Down.
There you go.
There, yep.
So I mean, it looks like it served a purpose for us to mow this, maybe. I don't know, but like, I mean, I understand there's obviously a culvert there, right?
So there's a culvert right here. So really the only mobile space is really this, right in front of the sidewalk. I tried to put some of these, I tried to put the actual picture from Google Street View on there.
Yeah,
So you
no.
can see what it is. Now that one's certainly a funky one, those three houses are separated from the creek, from that green space that's along the street there on Fieldcrest. So, the three houses are on Grant Ridge Lane. I mean, it's almost the other side of the block, but
And so who would we, in this scenario, instruct to mow? All three of them, they would have to decide, or is it based off of once we determine the deeds?
it would be determined based on the deeds, or, just looking straight at this map. I would say you come off this lot line, you come straight back to the next
Yeah,
adjacent curb line. So each one of those homeowners would need a portion of that. And again, there, most of that is wooded area along that creek line, but there are, 6-8 feet or so from the curb line back to this creek line that those homeowners don't even see. It's the homeowners on the next block back that are actually looking at it.
and to the best of our knowledge, this property is part and parcel of the homeowner's property. That's what we're trying to figure out.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
What if it is city property?
I don't know. Again, I don't know that it would be city property. I think it'll go back to what Neil was saying, that it was part of the original subdivision plats. I believe Mara and I looked at this one, and the subdivision plats laid this one out and said it's common ground, park space, something of those lines in 1930-ish when it was platted. And half of that subdivision's in Crestwood and half of it's in
So
Webster Groves.
Mara just texted and said it was identified as park, but then you have to look to the language of the subdivision itself, the plat itself, to see if they have a provision for it in there. Because typically, again, this would have been before there would have been any kind of planning and zoning. So it was someone's responsibility to
Yeah.
cut and maintain. So you're gonna have to look there for that language.
Would the city be, what if all of these property owners, for instance, are like, you know what, we're gonna get together as a subdivision and we want to pay the city to mow it? Is it a revenue stream for us?
Time issue too, though,
Uh,
right?
Well,
Yeah.
potentially, but it wouldn't be a revenue stream. You'd charge them for what the actual cost would be, right? So again, if it cost us $50 to cut it, you'd charge them $50 to cut it.
So in my old house in Webster, we had a common area across from my house, and we existed as a subdivision group just to pay the annual bill to have that mowed by someone. So we didn't do anything else like as a subdivision, but and I have a feeling that's the case in a lot of places. Like, it's just in some of these that stopped happening, or they never quite organized in that way or something, and it just didn't get taken care of. So the city just started doing it, and I could see how that would happen.
Yeah.
But it does kind of feel like it's maybe more than the individual homeowners. It's back on the subdivision to solve the problem. It's because especially if they end up being the landowner.
Sure. Well, there's the one street that you showed me that owns all the islands. What street is that?
Gerard Avenue,
Gerard, which has
six islands.
6 islands, which, by the way, an 80-foot pumper, or an 80-foot, a 40-foot pumper could never navigate. I mean, it's just, there's too many, but it's all grass and it's all plantings. It's little trees here and there, but not, again, you got to go through with a lawnmower and you got to cut it. I suspect when that plat was created, that was the intention of the subdivision to cut it, to take care of it and do that as sort of your community responsibility. Again, but it ultimately devolved to the city to do it, and we've been doing it ever since.
So like those islands, for instance, that are subdivision, if they don't maintain them, what's our recourse?
Pave them,
What'd you say?
pave them.
God.
But you could, you see some of these places which are decorative, they put stone, they put a variety of things, and they maintain, if there's trees on them, they maintain the trees, but they put other things that don't have to be cut, that don't require the same level of maintenance.
I mean, do we cite every subdivision homeowner?
No,
And-
but you give them notice and you kind of give people a choice. Look, here's what we've got. This has to be attended to. Here's what your plat responsibilities were, or not, whatever it might be. We think these are subdivision questions. We'd like you to address that. And it can be addressed by you as a group agreeing to do this, or If you want us to do it, then we'll send you the bill and you guys split the bill.
I mean, this is a lot of property we were mowing. I mean, it's startling to me to see everything.
And it's isolated too, so it's
Yeah.
not like you can just ride the mower to the next location.
And that's the
Load back up and-
hardest, that's the hardest part of this. There's over 100 different locations to go to.
Yeah.
So, some of these are, it only takes 4 minutes to mow it, but it takes 5 minutes to unload the mower from the trailer, mow it for 4 minutes, blow it off, 5 minutes, put it back on the trailer, and 10 minutes to drive to the next site. You're in it for 45 minutes or an hour for that 5 minutes worth of mowing.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
can
hard
we, just because we have a lot of other things to do tonight, so I really think of your proposal as really two proposals. One is what are we doing with homeowners and what are we doing with our public space parks? We haven't had a single question, I don't think, about parks. So it sounds to me like this council feels good about what you've recommended for parks. Is that a fair interpretation? And then it sounds like you're still working on gathering information about these plots. And I think I would summarize also that everyone likes the direction, but wants just a little bit more detail about what this means for specific homeowners and things like that. Is that also a fair?
Yeah, like my three things are just understanding this has been going on for a long time and just to be like understanding as we're talking with neighbors about this. And then see what we sell, what we can sell. If we really own it as a city, it's not just an easement, like try to sell that if they are interested in buying it. And then the third one was just to make sure we're involving the neighbors with the decisions about the properties that are around them. So they don't end up with something that they don't want to be next to.
Now, and this may be a question for Neil rather than Scott. If we're going to sell something, it comes back to us anyway.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
because we're putting something on the rolls that what is
Yes.
off the tax rolls goes
Right.
back on the tax rolls.
Yeah.
So it's to our advantage to do it. And there's a process that we have to follow into the code, but it's not an onerous process. We've done before. You've seen it while
Yeah.
you've been on the board.
Right.
Or on council. So again, it's something that we can do. And I don't know why we wouldn't divest ourselves, nor do I know why a homeowner wouldn't want additional land. I mean, it's
Yeah.
home wealth, right?
Yeah, but I guess in response to your question, then in terms of this sale part of this, it's not like we say tonight, oh, we want to do that, and then it just goes on.
Right.
The particular sale will come back to us, and if we have concerns about a particular sale, we can raise them at that time.
Mhm, mhm.
So,
You would see each one.
yeah, so Scott, so again, parks, it sounds like it's great. The sale part, I think we all want to pursue what we can on that. And then just a little bit more information. Since you're already getting this information, I assume you're going to have to put it together in a meaningful way. And if we could see that, I don't know that we need a full presentation of that. We can see how it goes, but just get a little bit more information so people here are comfortable with what we're actually asking residents to do.
Absolutely.
Can I also say, I just wanted to commend you because I feel like you're being creative and looking at all the things, in terms of cutting expenses and coming up with new ideas and solutions. And I think it's fantastic. And I don't mean to shoot it down. I think it's really great that you're kind of looking at all the angles.
And by the way, this presentation, I don't want us to underestimate how much time and energy it took for you to put it together. So thank you for that, because as I said to you before the meeting, it's a different conversation when we can actually see what we're talking about. So thanks for doing that for us.
Really impressive. And it was really interesting to go through.
It was,
I
yeah.
always
agree.
assumed you got to Gerard through Edgar Road for some reason.
You clearly have not knocked on those doors.
I would say you have not made that wrong turn before.
All right.
That's an interesting.
Thank
street.
you. Thank you very much, Scott. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Peoples asked that I return to her for a minute, so please go right ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I want to give Mr. Davis my thanks as well. It took incredible research to come up with some of that. So thank you for that. So yes, you were right, Mayor. I did have an update. The Strategic Planning Subcommittee met last week, and that was comprised of councilpersons Richardson, Smith, and Bliss. And so we do have just a couple of discussion points on that and to move through them quickly. As a recap for council, on October 4th, I was planning on presenting the strategic plan work that we've done so far. And being brief with that, but you all may recall, we've done quite a bit of work to advance our strategic plan. So we were going to go over that on October 4th, and then we were set to have the actual strategic plan retreat on October 15th. So the dilemma is that October 4th is a very full agenda because we've had some pressing and priority things that naturally should take place with the flooding events that have occurred. We now have MSD joining us on October 4th, along with a couple of other things. So our options are either to start a little earlier or to figure out some other creative ways to get that information to you so that the 15th can still be meaningful for the actual retreat. Additionally, I believe there are a couple of council members that may have a little bit of a conflict on the morning of the 15th. I'll let them share that. And I believe the last standing order of business is we needed to settle on the facilitator for the 15th. So Mayor, that was quite a bit, but that's what I wanted to share. And if we could have a little discussion around that.
Okay, so, yeah, that's lots of, so somebody on strategic planning, tell me what's going on. What's the conflict Saturday morning? I mean, and I will tell you, I'm a little skeptical about moving this around because it took us so long to get a date. So
I don't think we're
lay
saying
my
forcefully
cards
we
on the
need to do that.
table.
It's the
Yeah.
Ivy Crockett run, and several of us try to support that every year of the School District Foundation. Their big fundraiser. It's the run for the kids and families and anybody who wants to participate. It's been going on for a long time, and I did not realize it was that morning when we had the poll initially. And so what we had talked about maybe was pushing it back an hour or so of the start of our strategic planning session, if that's palatable to folks, but I don't know. I'm also, if in the end we decide to meet at that time, I will just be there. But I did want to raise that as a little bit of a concern.
I have something right after it. So if we want to move it back, maybe it doesn't take all 3 hours, or maybe I scoot out early, but I do have something currently right after it.
So Mayor, I guess, is there a specific time or a special time any of the council people want to start that meeting on the 15th?
well, currently it's set scheduled to start at 9.
9 to 12.
That was 9 to 1. Is it 9 to 12?
I have 9 to 12.
Yeah, we have 3 hours.
Okay.
Plan it out.
I
So,
believe it is 9 to 12. Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. So, going to the facilitator, and I know we're not quite there, but it is important that the facilitator is also available on the 15th. So that discussion needs to occur kind of simultaneously.
okay, so it sounds to me like these are related questions that we really can't answer at this moment in time. May I ask who is pursuing the facilitator?
Well, Mayor, my question is, should the committee pursue a facilitator and bring it back to the council? Or just move on with finding a facilitator?
Does anyone object to the committee just doing that? It seems much more efficient to me.
I have no objection.
No one's objecting, so committee, that's your job.
Great. We'll work with the city manager and find someone to be the facilitator.
And then, once we know about a facilitator, we can poll people on whether or not we can start at 9:30 or 10 and accommodate some of that. I know, actually, that's kind of an early morning Ivory Crockett, so. All right, does that cover what you had in mind, Dr. Peoples?
It does. The only outstanding question is on October 4th then, saying we'll move forward with October 15th, may play with the time a little bit up or down, but on October 4th, if the council still desires the recap, Mayor, that would probably require like a 6 p.m. start.
Yeah, and we had some discussions. I had some discussions with council members today about October 4th. So why don't we talk about that before we put the 6 p.m. start in stone? Because I think we might be able to make some adjustments.
Great, thank you.
All right,
Do we
moving
have an
right along.
agenda for strategic planning?
No, not yet.
All right.
Moving right along, we are on to topic number 2, the selection of the Charter Review Advisory Board members. And Eric, if you would just put that list of names up for us. Oh, well, we all have, I'll read the list of names. How about that? All right, if you remember our decision process that we outlined at the beginning of this was that anyone who got 5 votes or more, because that represents a council majority, would be placed on the commission. And those members who are those, well, they're going to be board members now. Those people receiving 5 votes or more are Nicole Chaput, Kyle Klemp, Michael Yoakley, Tammy Bem, and Jennifer Finney. We then have 3, so that's 5 that we have of our 9 regular members. Make sure I'm writing this on myself. So then we also have 3 members who received 4 votes, Joseph Dugan, Matthew Heil, and Jeannie Kirkton. Now, we could just go ahead and add them because they had that many votes without further discussion, or if we feel like we need to make some balancing, we can bring in the 3 members who got 3 votes, which are Paul Dribbin, John Eppers, and Melissa Johnson. So we know we have 5. Do we want to go ahead and accept those with 4 votes, or do we need to discuss that more fully in terms of balancing? What's the council's preference?
I like the way the numbers came out in terms of how many people kind of fit into that group and how many we needed to fill the terms or the slots. So it makes sense to me to take those who got 4 votes as automatically on.
I feel that when I did selected my 9, I made sure there was a balance, and it seems if we take and we had also discussed that anybody with 4 or less, we would kind of have a discussion about. I would prefer that we talk about those, with the 4 and 3 votes as one group in order to make sure we have a balanced group on the review board.
Anyone else?
I'm actually fine with going with the next 4. I mean, we've just had a lot to pull from. I don't know how we go through and balance, it was a big group to pull from, and so to get to where we are here, I'm good with going with the next 3.
David, do you have thoughts?
I would be perfectly fine going 6, 7, 8 as well. I think it's a consensus thing here at this point.
Ellen?
I'm fine.
Emerson?
Uh-oh.
Is he frozen or is just very still?
Never that.
All right, I think so.
Oh, you might be back. Are you back, Emerson?
He moved a little.
All right, we're gonna just assume that he's gonna chime in when he's ready. It seems to me that the majority of the council is ready to accept those next 4. 3, sorry, 3, which that would be Joseph Dugan, Matthew Heil, and Jeannie Kirkton. Okay, so that would get us to 8 members. We have then these 3 individuals who received 3 votes. We'd need 1 additional permanent council member, board member, sorry, and 2 alternates. So, do we want to assume that we will pull from those 3, the remaining alternate and permanent seats?
It
That
makes
works.
sense, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the question is, who among those 3 should be named as the permanent member? And, I've been thinking a lot, and we haven't really talked about the role of the alternate at this point. My recommendation would be other than the fact that the alternate is not a voting member, is let the board decide to what degree the alternates will participate in terms of asking questions and things like that.
So they would be required, the alternates would be required to attend every meeting
And
read all of the material and whatever else.
I mean, the actual board would decide. but
Okay.
It would be up to and including the fact that you could be a full board member without a vote. That would be the one, right, Neil? That's the one thing they cannot do.
Okay.
Right.
They can participate in any other way in the discussions and the deliberations.
Right. It would be just like an alternate juror. And the reason you're doing it is because you're asking these people to serve for a very long period of time.
Yeah.
And in the event that someone is unable to complete their term, you want to have somebody that's able to step up into that spot. In order to do that, they have to be caught up. And so
Right.
going and participating is an essential part of it. That's why they make alternate jurors show up every day.
Emerson's ready, I think.
Oh, Emerson, go for it.
I'm sorry, my internet is so unstable. But I do agree with you, Mayor, that, just looking at the last 3, I believe you said, to find the 9th person and the other 2 alternates. I guess looking at all the criteria that we had looked at, we want to make sure it was a balanced group. Did any of those individuals have some type of criteria that would balance the group even more?
The primary one, I think, is geography, in terms of, there's a couple on that list of 3 who are South Webster residents, and there's not a lot of that elsewhere. on the
Okay, I
list.
think we're to the point, folks, where we got to name names.
Okay.
Right.
Because having this in the abstract is not going to get us moving forward. So Sarah,
John
would you?
Uppers-
Huh?
So John Uppers and Mel Johnson live south of 44.
Yes.
For me, it's generation and experience, and so therefore outstanding with me, Paul Driven. That's my 9th choice, or choice for the 9th spot.
David, Karen, you have,
John Eppers for me, because just his interest in, and even the council, his active, his time and commitment with that, and even just sitting in on more of the council meetings and at along with this location. I mean, John Eppers would be the one for me.
Emily?
John Uppers is my pick as well for geography, and I think he also brings some diversity of occupation.
Mhm.
I would pick Melissa Johnson because of her expertise, and because of where she lives.
David?
I would select John, I believe, for several reasons, not only geography, but I don't think we have a blue collar guy or a blue collar individual on this crab board yet.
Emerson?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. My in and out.
You're frozen now.
Is that correct?
Hey, Emerson, would you try turning off your camera and maybe we will be able to at least hear you better?
Oh, okay, great. Let me see. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yep, that might have been it. So we did have a conversation, but I really couldn't hear, of an individual south of 44, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and who was those individuals? I don't have my information with me.
John Eppers and Melissa Johnson.
They are south of 44?
Correct.
Okay, and what is the third candidate's name?
Paul Dribbin.
Yeah. I do like Paul, I do like John Eppers as well. So, but I important that we kind of make sure that every
Emerson, I'm afraid we lost you again.
We're gonna do a proxy vote.
Yeah.
So we have Paul Dribbin, John Eppers, and Melissa Johnson.
Can you hear me?
Now we
Yes.
can.
John Eppers.
All right. And then mine would have been for Melissa Johnson, but it's irrelevant given the numbers. So it looks like we now have moved John Eppers to the list of the 9, and then Paul Dribbin and Melissa Johnson will be asked to serve as alternates. Do we need a formal vote on this entire slate?
Yes.
All right. It's work session. Do I need a motion in work session?
If you'd like, we can make it all official.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move for the selection and adoption of the 9 members, including John Eppers, that is listed
See who
on
that is?
what I will assume is now Exhibit 1.
Second.
All right.
Do we need to call these out for people that's listening?
Yeah, so how about this? How about if I just review these numbers? I mean, the members then would be Nicole Chapu, Kyle Klemp, Michael Yoakley, Tammy Bem, Jennifer Finney, Joseph Dugan, Matt Heil, Jeannie Kirkton, and John Eppers, with Paul Dribbin and Melissa Johnson participating as alternates.
Ready?
Yeah.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith. Thumbs up, Emerson.
That was yes.
All right, good.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
All right. We might, well, no, I'm not going to say that and jinx us. Forgive me. All right, so we are going to move on to now charter or the recommendations for the Charter Review Advisory Board that have come from staff and council members. So you got a memo in your packet, and why don't we just go ahead and throw it up there so anyone who's watching can see what we're talking about. We solicited from council members as well as the city manager and the assistant city manager and finance director did from staff changes to be made, and they've been grouped into two categories. One is the first category are relatively minor, what I refer to as housekeeping or updating changes. And almost all of those came from staff. And they are in the first page of the memo that you received. Because we do need to vote on these recommendations, the idea is to vote on these as a block with one single vote, unless someone wants to remove something and discuss a particular item. Is there anything that should be removed from this list? All right, do I say all in favor, say aye, or do you do that, Katie?
You may do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify though?
Yeah.
We're at voting on these to say we would like to recommend these be considered by the.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I should have done that at the very
No, I just
beginning,
wanted to
Sarah.
make sure I understood as
So
well.
let's make it perfectly clear that both staff and council recommendations to the Charter Commission are simply items that we are suggesting that they review. There is no requirement that they review them. There is nothing. Once they establish themselves, they will establish their own order and their own process for reviewing the charter. We are essentially calling their attention to some things that both staff and council members believe should be part of their process. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
So, yeah, okay, so, and again, thank you for that. I should have started that way. So all in favor of the group of recommendations marked as minor changes, updating and housekeeping items, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, those items then are accepted. Now, we have an equal number of items that have larger policy implications, and we're going to have to go down and vote as a voice vote on these individually. If you have a comment or a suggestion that you'd like to make on this, absolutely, please feel free to do so. Please remember, though, we are not arguing for or against a policy right now. We are simply talking about whether we would like to send this recommendation on to the Charter Review Advisory Board. All right, so let's, and I'm just going to go by numbers since they're all numbered, and I will raise 2.1. Is there anyone who wants to discuss Article 2.1? All in favor of this recommendation, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? No one opposed? All right, 2.1 is accepted. 2.2, Article 2.2. Is there anyone who would like to discuss 2.2? How about let's do it this way. You all have read this, right?
Yes.
Is there anything on this list that anyone wants to discuss individually? Let's make this easier on ourselves.
Can we have a minute to go through it one more
Yes,
time?
absolutely. Why don't we take a minute, take a look, and if you
Okay.
have one, then we'll pull it out.
Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, Emerson.
Tell Eric, I'm gonna give him a call, if you don't mind, to hold me on his cell phone in case I'll be able to voice one way or the other.
Is
He's
that fine with
affiliated.
you? Yes, Mr. Peterson has no problem with that.
Thank you.
He can manage multiple things at the same time.
I have a question.
Yeah, just mark the ones that you have a question on and we'll just go in order and you can stop when we're. Or we'll pull those out for discussion.
número marcado no existe. Por favor, confírmalo e inténtalo nuevamente.
Emerson, you might want to mute, my friend. I know. Daylight savings.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
I thought we ended.
The spring one. I don't know. Just pops up on my electronic calendar when it's time. All right, are we ready to move ahead?
They're on Halloween.
Okay, so if you marked an item, would you simply tell me what the item number is, please?
4.3,
4.3? Anything else?
5, 6, 7, 8. And the new one, the first
Wait,
new one,
5, 6, 7.
very end,
Oh, got it. Thank you.
and then the
All of
next
the new
one.
ones, the new one
Yeah,
there.
just the one new one.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have things they'd like to discuss?
I have, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, Emerson.
I have 2.2. And, shoot, there was another one here. And there was one that was saying about the power of the mayor and city council person, I mean, city manager. I guess that just needs some clarification. I'm sorry, what
Okay,
was it?
So that's 2.13. Okay, so how
Okay.
about we do this? We're going to discuss those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. Can I have a motion to accept the remaining items on list number 2, which is labeled larger policy items?
I'll
Yeah.
make a motion to accept the remaining items.
Second,
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving along here. Okay, 2.2, Emerson, you asked this to be pulled out and it refers to reviewing the mayor's duties and authority. Would you like to just discuss why we're pulling that one out?
Yeah, that's just looking for clarification. Based on the type of city government we have, what are we trying to achieve with that? We're trying to increase the duties or see if the duties not enough, too much.
So and I mean, I think it's a useful question, but let's keep in mind also that these are recommendations for review. There is no specific policy recommendation on this particular item. And I don't know, David, if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, Emerson, my thought would be, this is obviously the city charter, and there are 3 individuals / entities that are granted powers within it, and that would be the city manager, the mayor, and the city council. And I think if we're going to review the city charter, might as well review the powers that are invested in each to determine if it's the appropriate entity to hold that power, or if they need additional powers in order to operate in the 21st century.
Well, here's my question then. If, let's say, for example, we want to increase the mayor's power, wouldn't that change how we function as a city?
I don't know if that would necessarily be the case. You could add additional powers without removing the concept of a city manager, city council, governing body.
I think you could add duties.
Yeah.
Powers would be an entirely different question because powers are set by statute. So duties in terms of asking the mayor to perform certain functions and tasks certainly could be done without getting to what Emerson has said, but it would have to be something that would be determined literally on the specifics of the language.
This is why we have council present. I'm a simple man.
All right, thank you.
All right, so Do I have a motion to accept 2.2?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, Emerson opposed. There's no one opposed. Okay. Do we need to discuss 2.13? It's essentially the same question in terms of reviewing powers and duties. Or, excuse me, reviewing tasks. Can we go ahead and vote on that one? Can I have a motion for 2.13?
Yes, Mayor, to move for the recommendation of 2.13 to go to CRAB.
Is there a second?
second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we're moving on to 4.13.
4.3.
4.3.
I just wanted to know which
Well,
one.
Yeah,
which-
would you read what it is?
Which board and commissions should be listed in the charter, if any? And my question was which ones are now? Anything?
Yes,
I couldn't remember.
Parks and Recreation Commission, Personnel Board, a couple other commissions are as well.
plan commissions in
Planning
there.
Commission is there.
But many are not.
And the the pension fund board that we don't even have anymore. So not, they're a group of, a handful of them that are there, and
Okay,
then the rest are not.
okay, so yeah, I would like for that to be reviewed then.
All right, would you like to make a motion for us to vote on that?
I move that we accept 4.3 as a recommendation to move forward to the charter revisory,
See again.
the charter revisory board.
There you
No.
go. There you just.
We
make it work.
got rid of a letter.
All right, David got our second, so all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed,
Aye.
nay.
Aye.
All right, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
That was me again.
Yes, and this refers to which departments, if any, should be included in the charter, and if included, what are the powers of each department? and What is the council's oversight role in each?
Again, I just wanted to know which ones are included. Are
The
some
larger
are-
question, I'm sorry, the larger question is, should they even be in a charter?
That's why I asked who is.
Yeah.
So that then would be a referral to the Charter Review Advisory Board about whether or not they should be in it, and they could make a recommendation to us which ones and why,
If any.
if any.
Question.
Yeah. So again, we're not discussing the merits of which one should be in there, or the wisdom of putting some of them in there. It's just a matter of, do we
So
want?
some are in there.
Yes, some are
Okay.
in there.
Couldn't remember. Okay. I move that we recommend 5, 6, 7, and 8 to be part of the review by the advisory board.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, and then we have 3 things labeled new. I believe the one that was pulled is considering requiring each department head to provide yearly testimony to the city council.
Just curious what that is, yearly testimony.
Like a state of the department is what I'm envisioning. They effectively do that during budget season. I want it to
Right.
be a little bit more formal. And then outline what their vision is for their department, and also the budgetary constraints or needs moving forward.
And why should that be? My question would be, why in the charter rather than simply doing that by ordinance and having the flexibility
It's
over
a
time?
valid question. Frankly, I think it only gets done if it's in the charter. And I think there's more teeth to it. That's my only thought.
That can be said about a lot of things that we do. We just can't, I think with the direction of the administration now, I think a lot of those things are happening by practice. And I think as a council, we can instruct the city manager to make that happen every year at a certain time.
And all I would say is, can you imagine me requesting that of a former city manager and that being appreciated or?
But we're talking about now, based on what we have.
But yeah, and I understand but city managers change, obviously, and city council members change.
Sure.
All right, do we have a motion then? I'm sorry, is there further discussion? I apologize. Do we have a motion?
I would motion for the item of new number 1, considering requiring each department head to provide yearly testimony to the city council be recommended to the crowd.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
I,
Those opposed?
No.
No. The ayes have it.
and I just want to make, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, Emerson.
Yes, it's just that charter comes back to us for review, their changes. We have another opportunity to look at it again.
Right. And, it is also within the scope of the Charter Commission to say, this is in the charter now, or this came to us and we don't believe it belongs in the charter. You all should do it by ordinance. And we may hear that from them as well. All right, Madam City Clerk, have we done the charter stuff that we need to do?
I believe you have.
I,
just wanted to say thank you for putting all this together, because this was a lot of work and it made it so clear and easy to do. And just thank you for that work.
Well, and I feel like we had an incredibly talented pool of people to choose from.
Goodness.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a lot of consideration, a lot of preparation on their part. I gave it a lot of consideration. So I really appreciate, and I'm happy with the outcome.
And I just wanted to go on record as saying, with given the interest in the pool and the qualifications and just where the applicants were coming from, it was very difficult, and I'm just really glad that so many of our citizens were willing to step up and do that. And I just hope that even if they weren't selected, their input and what they have to offer is very much appreciated. And we just had a hard road to whittle it down to 9.
yeah, I mean, with.
And Mayor,
over-
I'd just like to make one point that I want to thank the staff for their input into this process as well. I think it's very important that we include them in such monumental tasks as the charter. It looked like they stepped up with their ideas.
Absolutely, because the list, substantially, there's quite a number of items from the staff that I think will help us clarify and just update things. And I do want to thank especially the city clerk who kept track of all of our interviews and got everybody here, even when we were amazingly running ahead of schedule. Produce people. So thank you, Katie, for that. And I just want to add my also notes of praise to our residents for so many people applying, over 30 people applying for this Charter Review Advisory Board, I think says so many great things about our community and people's willingness to work on behalf of the entire community and their neighbors. And I certainly appreciate everyone doing that. And I learned some stuff during those interviews about the charter and about the task we have ahead. So I look forward to that. I think we're scheduled. Is there anything else that we need in our work session? I guess I should look back at my agenda. We are not making any appointments to boards and commissions tonight. We'll get back on that track on the 4th of October. Anything else for the work session? We can't start our regular meeting before 8, can we?
We should not.
We should not. So believe it or not, you're going to have a whole 15 minutes of time to enjoy yourselves, and we will be back at 8 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you. Okay, we are ready to call our regular meeting to order, and I will turn on my microphone so that it actually works. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council. We welcome questions, ideas, and comments from the persons in attendance. Members of the audience may, however, comment only when recognized by the mayor. We ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the remarks of visitors section. And since we don't have any public hearings today, all comments should be during remarks of visitors for this meeting. And we're going to do that right out of the gate. If you'd like to speak and have not filled out a speaker card, they're available for you right there by the door as you come in. And if you are on Zoom and have a comment, we'll ask you to use the raise your hand function and recognize you at that time. And then we'll go ahead and call the roll, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
All right, we'll move right to remarks of the community and visitors. The first speaker card I have is from Scott McConnell. Mr. McConnell, if you'll come forward, give us your name and your address, and then please go ahead and share with us here what you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott McConnell. I live at 604 West Glendale. Nice to meet you all. I heard you guys speaking a little bit about the property, talking about the mowing issue that we live there. So I've lived there now for 5 years. Some of my neighbors have lived there a lot longer. I know that the city's always maintained that area. As you guys were discussing, it is a rather large piece of property. I think it might actually be, Scott and I were just talking about this. I think it might actually even be a little bit larger than 1/10 of an acre. And so I'm happy to have a conversation if it is about me taking over ownership of that piece of property. It concerns me if I have to be the one that's now responsible for it. Not only from a maintenance cost, maintenance time, from a liability issue. I mean, much the same way if you're asking somebody to shovel their drive or shovel the sidewalk when it's snowing, the area, it's in pretty bad disrepair as well. There's a lot of potholes and everything else. So am I responsible for filling those myself? Because if I'm going to be maintaining it, what happens if somebody falls on that piece of property? So, again, I'm happy to explore those issues. It's become so bad in the meantime. I can't even cut it. My lawnmower can't get through it. So we will need some help. The expectation, whether it was right or wrong, was that the city has always maintained this. So if we can receive some help in the meantime, while we kind of discuss what those other options are, I'd love to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
McConnell.
Thank you very much.
All right, the second card comes from Mr. Dave Buck.
Hello, Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts on strategic planning over the last several meetings, but I promise this is my last one. But particularly given the triumphant return of the old Webster Jazz and Blues Festival this past weekend, which was just unbelievable. I'm so happy for Joe Rath. My continued and fervent hope is that Webster Groves officially and finally adopt the strategic and unifying slogan of City of the Arts. City of the Arts gives Webster Groves a huge and historic canvas that, in my opinion, is unmatched by any neighboring city. Kirkwood has some arts, Maplewood has some arts. Nobody does what Webster Groves does. The arts certainly covers the fine arts, visual arts, theater arts, music arts, which we're all familiar with, as championed by the Webster Arts Foundation, the Webster Groves Arts Commission, the Rep, Opera Theater, Webster U, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And mostly all of our outstanding, talented residents in our very creative community. But the arts is also inclusive and touches every sector of our city. For example, our restaurants and the culinary arts, the recreational arts, the art of business, the art of education, the art of communication, the art of government, the art of leadership. The arts are everywhere and impact every one of us. And perhaps there is no other force on earth, not even religion, no other force on earth that can bring an entire community together and inspire and lift us up beyond our petty differences to a unifying and happy whole. Did you see the crowd this Saturday? 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 people. Nobody's talking about differences. Everybody is enjoying the music and enjoying each other. And we should celebrate that. I hope this makes it on your list of possible strategies when you get together on October the 4th and October the 15th. For one, I think it is about time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dave. Do we have any hands on our Zoom audience here?
I see none, Madam Mayor.
All right, does anyone have new business that they'd like to raise? I am going to call on the Assistant City Manager, Mr. Peterson, to talk about one issue.
Just one quick announcement for the council, but also for our community. We did post this earlier today. Waste Management had a billing error that many of our residents did notice and highlight. So we have connected with them. They have billed erroneously and not pursuant to their contract citizens for monthly garbage service, meaning they got a bill in September and October for those services when it should be just a quarterly bill. So if you were if you were billed an error, the Waste Management will be reversing all that, sending back any refunds if they did an auto pay collection or anything like that. And also, if you haven't heard from them in the next couple of days from Waste Management, which should be reaching out to each person, we do encourage you to call them. You can find their website to talk to their account there on our website. You can find their numbers, but I'll read it here. It's 1-866-909-4458. So I just want to encourage our residents, should they have that issue, to reach out to Waste Management. If you need connections or help with that, please let us know and we'll be happy to help.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll move ahead now to unfinished business and bill number 9192. I'd like to request a motion to amend that bill to incorporate the final numbers provided by the County Board of Equalization as referenced in said bill dated September 20th, 2022.
Madam Mayor, oh, sorry.
She's got the script.
Mayor, I move that we amend bill number 9192 by incorporating the final numbers provided by the County Board of Equalization as referenced in said bill dated September 20th, 2022.
Second.
All right, then I will ask for a motion then for the third reading.
Well, we have to vote first.
First.
Oh, we have to vote on the amendment. Yep,
Yes.
sorry. You even wrote it down right here for me. Vote taken on amendment. Please go
Councilmember
ahead.
Bliss? Yes. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd? Mayor Arnold?
Yes. All right, we will move on to bill number 9193, and I will request a similar motion
And then
for,
we'll just do the third reading for 9192.
oh, jeez.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. It's right here in front of my face. I have a motion for the third reading of bill number 9192.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third reading of bill number 9192 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9192, third and final reading as amended. In ordinance, levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2022 by the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, and repealing ordinance 9157.
Is there any discussion? All right, let's vote on bill number 9192.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd? Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss? Yes.
Now I would like to ask for a motion to amend bill 9193 by incorporating the final numbers provided by the County Board of Equalization.
Yes, Mayor. I move that we amend bill number 9193 by incorporating the final numbers provided by the County Board of Equalization as referenced and dated September 20th, 2022.
Second.
Second.
All right, discussion of the amendment? Let's vote on the amendment.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss? Yes. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
All right, let's have the third reading of bill number 9193.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third reading of bill number 9193 and subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9193, third reading as amended. In ordinance, levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2022 for the Webster Groves Library District and repealing ordinance 9158.
Is there any discussion? All right, let's vote on Bill 9193, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd. Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander, will you call for the third reading of Bill number 9194, please?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third reading of Bill number 9194 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9194, third reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, cut, trim, remove trash and debris, remove trees, dump fees, board up, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
Is there any discussion? All right, let's vote, please.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd. Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
All right, Councilmember Franklin, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9195, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9195 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9195, third reading. An ordinance repealing ordinance number 8270 to remove the lot split approval for a new lot at 452 Foot Avenue and returning the property to one lot addressed as 446 Foot Avenue.
Any discussion? All right, let's have the vote.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd. Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9196, please?
Yes, Mayor, I call for the third reading of Bill number 9196 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9196, third reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a lease agreement between the city and NCW PCS MPL 27-year Sites Tower Holdings LLC. Who thought that was a good name? And a settlement agreement between the city and CCAT LLC, Crown Castle International Corporation, New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, and NCW PCS MPL 27-year Sites Tower Holdings LLC.
Can we make up a fourth reading just so you have to do that again? All right, is there any discussion? All right, let's call for the vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
All right, we will move on to new business. First up for new business are flood information updates from the State Emergency Management Agency. Karen McHugh is with us. Karen, I believe you're being promoted to a panelist as we speak.
Yep.
There we go. Are you with us, Karen?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to share my screen. Would that be possible?
I can, if you wish, Ms. McHugh, I can share it for you and you can just tell me next if that works. Is that easier?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first, let me thank you for being here. We very much appreciate you coming to help us understand more about all the processes relating to the flooding and where we are and what action can and should be taken. And I will let it go from there unless the city manager had something she wanted to say. I'm not sure about that.
No, ma'am, I was just going to introduce Miss McHugh, but you did it, so we can get started.
All right.
Awesome. Very good. So I would like to thank the City of Webster Groves Mayor and the City Manager Marie Peoples for inviting me to present the basics of the National Flood Insurance Program during the City of Webster Groves City Council meeting. I'll present the basic National Flood Insurance Program information and discuss how important the city's participation is in the program. So next slide, please. So let's begin with a brief history of the National Flood Insurance Program. The National Flood Insurance Act of 1968 created the National Flood Insurance Program, or the NFIP as it's now commonly called. It was created to help educate citizens about the hazards of developing and building in high-risk areas. If people understand the hazards of developing and building in high-risk areas, so the thinking went, future flood losses would be reduced, as well as federal expenditures for disaster assistance. Prior to the National Flood Insurance Act, affordable flood insurance was not available. So it is significant that the program provides citizens with favorably priced flood insurance through the federal government so that those suffering from flood losses can recover faster following a flooding event. Next slide, please. So participation in the National Flood Insurance Program is voluntary. In order to participate in the program, communities must adopt a floodplain management ordinance that meets and better yet exceeds the minimum NFIP requirements found in Title 44 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The floodplain management ordinance states how a community will regulate development in the floodplain. The community must also adopt a resolution for participation in the NFIP and complete a one-page application for participation form. Next slide, please. Communities join the NFIP so that their citizens can obtain federally backed loans from banks for structures situated in the 1% floodplain, more commonly known as the 100-year floodplain. Individuals, businesses, and others buying, building, or improving buildings located in identified areas of special flood hazards are required to purchase flood insurance as a prerequisite for receiving a loan. Because a community is regulating new development, a measure of protection is being provided and the community's vulnerability to flood damage is reduced. One final and important point is that NFIP participation ensures that disaster assistance will be available to communities as well as individuals. Slide number 4, please. Now that you have a brief history of the NFIP, let me define a few common NFIP terms and their acronyms. You might have heard that term base flood. The base flood is defined as the flood that has a 1% chance of being equal or exceeded in any given year. It is the NFIP regulatory flood for floodplain management. Base flood elevation, or you might have heard BFE, is a water surface elevation resulting from the base flood event that is tied to a known vertical datum. In other words, is how high we expect the surface of the water to get during a 1% annual chance flood. In special flood hazard area, or SFHA, those are areas subject to the 1% or greater annual chance of flooding in any given year, that 100-year floodplain. This is the high risk area where communities must regulate new development. Flood insurance rate map, or the FIRM, is the official map of a community on which FEMA has defined special flood hazard areas, base flood elevations, and flood risk zones applicable to the community. Development is basically any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate. Next slide, please. A community is a political entity that has the authority to adopt and enforce floodplain ordinances for the area under its jurisdiction. And a structure is defined by the NFIP as a walled and roofed building, including a gas or liquid storage tank that is principally above ground, as well as a manufactured home. Slide 6, please. When it joins the NFIP, a community agrees to adopt and enforce all applicable NFIP regulations and require a floodplain development permit for all development, which, as you remember, is any man-made change in the special flood hazard area. It must require that new and substantially improved or substantially damaged structures be elevated to or above the base flood elevation. It should be noted that non-residential structures may be elevated or dry flood-proofed. The community must obtain proof of compliance with its floodplain management ordinance for all new structures with an elevation or floodproofing certificate. I will cover proof of compliance in a later slide because, slide number 7. Whoops, there we go. So the floodplain administrator has an extremely important job in the community. And the fundamental duties of the floodplain administrator are as you see them. But I do want to call out one important duty, namely require, review, and evaluate floodplain development permit applications. Floodplain development permits must be approved by the community's floodplain administrator prior to the start of construction. Slide number 8, please. So 2 other very important duties of the floodplain administrator are to make substantial improvement and substantial damage determinations. Substantially improved or substantially damaged structures must be brought into compliance with the community's floodplain regulations. In other words, the structure must now be protected from future flooding. Substantial damage determinations are especially important to break that devastating flood, rebuild, and repeat cycle. Next slide, please. The substantial damage formula is cost to repair back to a pre-damaged condition divided by the market value of the building prior to the damage, and that equals the percent of damage. Cost of repair is the true cost of labor and materials to restore the building back to its pre-damaged condition, even if the owner elects to do less. Potential sources for cost to repair can be itemized estimates from licensed contractors. Market value is defined by the NFIP simply as what a willing buyer would pay for the building. Potential sources for market value are independent fee appraisals or market value for taxing purposes. Slide 10, please. Thank you. FEMA has developed an excellent software tool, Substantial Damage Estimator 3.0, to assist states and local officials in determining substantial damage for residential and non-residential structures. This is used in coordination with the community's local floodplain management ordinance, which meets or exceeds the requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. The tool can be used to assess flood, wind, fire, seismic, and other forms of damage. It helps communities provide timely, substantial damage determinations so that reconstruction can begin following a disaster. Next slide, please. Under the NFIP, the Increased Cost of Compliance, or ICC program, may provide additional financial assistance to either elevate or remove flood damaged structures from the floodplain. The ICC applies to flooded structures that are either substantially damaged or have repetitive losses. Owners who have the insurance coverage are eligible to receive ICC benefits if the local official determines that the structure located in the FEMA mapped special flood hazard areas have been substantially damaged by a flood. Next slide, please. Eligible ICC activities are flood proof, and that's dry flood proof, non-residential structures only, relocate, elevate, and demolish. And our acronym for that is FRED. And that there are some exceptions to being able to use ICC, and that one of those is anyone who might have a group flood insurance policy. And that is a policy that FEMA pays for 3 years after someone has accepted individual assistance. Next slide, please. So this is what it's all about. This is a flood insurance rate map that was created during the FEMA's map modernization phase. And the flood maps that the city of Webster Groves has look similar to this. Most of the flood insurance rate maps in Missouri resemble this format, but there are many different types of firms effective in Missouri. And this is a countywide digital flood insurance rate map. And if you look at number 1, it is pointing to the unshaded zone X, and this is considered a low risk area. Communities do not regulate development here. If you look at where number 2 is pointing, that's zone A, and it's an approximate area, or in other words, it does not have a detailed study and is in the flood hazard area without base flood elevations. This is considered a high risk area, and communities regulate new development here. Number 3 points to zone AE, and it is the 1% annual chance or the 100-year floodplain with base flood elevations. This is considered a high-risk area. Communities regulate new development here. Number 4 points to a regulatory floodway, and the floodway is the white hatched area. Keep in mind that once FEMA defines a floodway, the special flood hazard area is divided into floodway and floodway fringe. This is a high velocity, high risk area. And in order to develop here, an engineering no rise certificate must be signed and sealed by a Missouri licensed professional engineer. That states that the development will not increase any rise in the effective that will not cause any rise in the effective published base flood elevations. Communities very carefully regulate development here. And number 5 is the base flood elevation. It's the water surface elevation, and it's rounded on the flood insurance rate map. It's rounded to the nearest whole number, nearest whole foot. And we instruct users to consult the flood insurance study, profiles, and the tables for a more accurate elevation to 1/10 of a foot. And number 6 points to a zone X, and it is the 0.2% annual chance, 500-year floodplain. Communities do not regulate development here, but are advised to discuss that moderate risk areas can turn into high risk areas on the next effective flood insurance rate map. And finally, number 7 points to a cross section, and that's the flood insurance profiles and tables document the details at the cross section. Next slide, please. So when someone in the city of Webster Groves wants to develop within the city's corporate limits, the first step for Travis Ham is to check the flood insurance rate map to see if the project is located in the FEMA map special flood hazard area. If the project is located in the high-risk flood zone, and that would be any zone that begins with an A, such as an A, an AE, an AO, AH, or AR, the owner or the developer must have a community-approved floodplain development permit prior to the start of construction. Slide 15, please. If the project is located in the special flood hazard area, Travis must check to see if the subject property is also in the regulatory floodway. Next slide. If the project is located in the regulatory floodway, it must be demonstrated through hydrologic and hydraulic analysis that the proposed development will not result in any increase in the flood levels during the occurrence of the base flood discharge. Next slide, please. So no rise certification is required for all proposed development in the regulatory floodway and must be obtained by the community before the floodplain development permit may be issued. No rise certification must be completed, signed and sealed by a registered Missouri professional engineer. Next slide, please. And I threw this in here. This is just a sample engineering no rise certificate that would be presented to the floodplain administrator before he could approve the floodplain development permit. Next slide, please. If you get a chance, please visit our website at sema.dps.mo.gov. Next slide. Our floodplain management portion of SEMA's website is full of NFIP information, brochures, our trainings, and technical bulletins. Slide 21, please. Okay, so let's talk about some details for the city of Webster Groves and the Webster Groves participation in the NFIP. So the city joined the program in the emergency phase back in 1974 on January 23rd, 1974. And what that means is the city at that time, there was not a flood insurance rate map. And it went into the regular entry on September 29th, 1978, when the first flood insurance rate map became effective. So the city should have been regulating development since 1974. Let's see, your current map is dated February 4th, 2015. And yes, there is a study underway for St. Louis County. And your level of regulation is a D. So what that means is a 60.3D ordinance has been adopted by the city because you have regulatory floodway within your corporate limits. Let's see, you have, your last formal audit was in 2003, and you've had a informal audit or just an informal visit in 2019. And your floodplain administrator has gone to several NFIP workshops. And you have 73 policies in force with over $13 million worth of insurance in force. You've had 70 paid losses to the tune of $1.461 million. And you've had, since 1978, you've had 5 substantial damage claims. So next slide, please.
Can I ask a question on that before you move to the next slide?
Absolutely.
The number, yes, what is it number of paid losses, the 70 since the regular map in 1978? What's the time frame for that number?
The 70 paid losses?
Yes.
I understand it's from 1978.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so this just goes into a little bit of detail about the city's 60.3D floodplain management ordinance. Your effective ordinance is 8869, and it was adopted on January 6, 2015. And it was amended a few days after that. There must have been some little thing with the ordinance that we had to fix. So that's 8873. In your ordinance, the city has done an excellent job of adopting higher standards, which is what FEMA and the state want to see, because the higher standards keep your citizens safer. So you have adopted a 1-foot freeboard, 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So the lowest floor of any new construction, any new buildings will have to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So that's 1 foot of freeboard and 1 foot of safety for the next 100-year event. You also have cumulative of substantial damage and improvement. So each time a structure has been damaged by a flooding event, the floodplain administrator is tracking those percentages. And when that percentage hits 50%, then the structure needs to be brought into compliance with the city's floodplain management ordinance. So in other words, the city is protecting the structure from future flood damage. You have a hazardous material in your ordinance, which simply states we're not going to store any hazardous material in the floodplain. Non-conforming use and repetitive loss definition. And that repetitive loss definition allows the someone who has an effective flood insurance policy to have, if they have more than one flooding event, to try to obtain that ICC funding to bring their structure into compliance. Back in 2020, we did send a higher standards ordinance to the city because the city was considering participation in the community rating system program, which offers a discount to the folks that have flood insurance policies on their premium. Next slide, please.
A quick question where you talk about the repetitive loss.
Karen, will you pull your microphone down?
When you talk about the repetitive loss definition.
Yes.
Does that mean during the period of time that the individuals own the property? Or is there a set period of time over which you then say,
yeah,
you scratch that and then start all over with a new period?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's with the structure. And your ordinance in the definition section, your ordinance probably says 10 years. So the floodplain administrator will be tracking damage for 10 years. And then once it hits the 10 years, and it would start over.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have 5 effective panels in the city. I assume that your Travis Ham, your floodplain administrator, has the flood insurance rate maps. He should be the repository of the maps. You can go online and look at the FEMA Map Service Center. You can go online and look at the map panels. I heard somebody say something. Was that you, Travis?
No.
Yeah, if you don't have your flood insurance rate maps, let us know, and we have a map printer and we can print up a set for you. But your floodplain administrator is Travis Ham. He's your local superhero. And he has been out working this flooding event and doing his substantial damage determinations. And he's doing an excellent job with that. Your maps are dated, effective date of your maps are February 4th, 2015. And next slide. So this is the floodplain management staff. That's me, Karen McHugh. My phone number, Lynn Welch is a floodplain management officer. Linda Olson is the emergency management officer. Daryl Rockfield is in the floodplain mapping section, and his employee is Sydney Roberts. You can call any of us at any time if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So that's it. And Mayor, I don't know if you have want to, I'm perfectly willing to stay on and answer questions if there's more questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that presentation and you being here. And I'm going to ask council if members have questions. That's a lot of information to digest in one.
It really is, yes.
Okay, well, my colleagues are not jumping in, so I have a couple of questions. So we'll go with mine to start with. So one of our residents suggested that one option for some of our homeowners would be to give a permanent variance from ordinances to make repair and rebuilding, and that make repair and rebuilding in floodplains expensive. Is it possible for us to do that? And what impact would that have on our eligibility for residents in terms of flood insurance?
So in your floodplain management ordinance, there is a variance section. It has to be in there.
Okay.
Variances are always a possibility, and we highly recommend that you do not issue variances. When you issue a variance, you place people and property at risk, and you set a precedent. You can't say yes to one variance and no to the next one. So the next thing you know, you have a whole bunch of variances. And FEMA looks at more than one community issue variance as a pattern of non-compliance. You adopted that ordinance, you are supposed to enforce that ordinance. So issuing variances is a very poor way to regulate development in the floodplain.
What is the, punishment's probably not the right word, but I'll use it, punishment for a pattern of non-compliance.
Okay, FEMA has some enforcement procedures in place. And the first one is probation. And when a community is put on probation, it's because their program is not performing like it should. And the community has up to a year to remedy their violations. And during that probationary period, everyone that has a flood insurance policy, and what did we say? We had 70 policies effective in this city. Everyone has to pay a $50 surcharge when they renew their policy, and all new policies written would have a surcharge. You would have up to a year to work with us and to work with FEMA to remedy your violations. If you don't, then you'll be suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program. And when you're suspended, policies cannot be renewed and new policies cannot be written.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Are there other questions?
So you indicated, I think it was September 29th, 1978 is when Webster joined the flood participation program, joined the program. Webster has a stock of very old properties.
Yes.
So
yeah.
How then did we manage the properties that were already, the notifications for properties that were already existing in designated special flood hazard areas?
Okay, so excellent question. From the date of your first flood insurance rate map, that date is the cutoff date between what we call pre-firm and post-firm. Everything built on the date that you joined the regular phase of the NFIP and got your first flood insurance rate map, everything built after that is post-firm, and it should be built in compliance. Everything built before that, when we didn't know what the risk was, we didn't know what the base flood elevation was, we didn't know anything, that's called pre-firm. And those pre-firm structures are usually those structures that are built below the base flood elevation and they get flooded over and over. They're fine the way they are until they have a substantial damage or until they make a substantial improvement. And that's that 50%. So if you have a $100,000 house and it's going to cost $60,000 to fix it up, to get it back to a pre-damaged condition, and it's a pre-firm structure, then to get back into that house, they're going to have to elevate it or remove it from the floodplain, because you don't want your homeowner to go through this flooding event over and over and over.
Ms. McHugh, does your department handle the buyout portion of this as well?
Well, no, the mitigation section is under the recovery division like I am, but that is a separate section. Heidi Carver is the state hazard mitigation officer, and she has several mitigation folks that work for her. We work together, but we're part of the NFIP, but we have different areas.
So if I had questions such as, and you know, if you are uncomfortable answering this, please let me know because I don't want to put you on the spot that way. But, you know, one of the things that we just don't know is FEMA's says that their standards up to 75% of the cost in terms of a buyout, but that's the ceiling. And I am curious in understanding what kind of variability is there between the 0 and 75%? And is there an average? When do we know what that percentage will be and how will we know?
That is an excellent question for Heidi, and
Okay.
I would be jumping right into her area, but what I
Okay.
understand is the match is 25%, and you can do some in-kind match. I just can't tell you what that is.
Okay, I will send my questions along to her then. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Are there council members who have other questions? All right, not to prolong this, I just have one more that I wrote down, then I couldn't read my handwriting. So you talked about the ICC program.
Excellent program, yeah.
How do homeowners know if they're eligible for those benefits?
Very good question. If you have an active NFIP flood insurance policy, you have ICC. It's written into the policy. Everyone, residential, non-residential. So if you have an active flood insurance policy, talk to your agent. They're going to have to work with Travis. If Travis has declared them to be substantially damaged, or if they have a history of loss, then they can apply for ICC funds. Unfortunately, it's only up to 30,000. We would love to see that raised to a more reasonable amount of money, like $90,000, because you can't do a lot with 30,000. But that is right now, that is the amount, up to 30,000.
And again, you said, I think you just said, I'm sorry, I thought my question was going to be, if you had a previous event regarding the ICC funds, I'm kind of missing my question. You said that if you had it before, then you would not be eligible for the ICC, or if you've used it before, if you had another flooding event, it goes back to that. If that flooding event was 10 years ago, does that still apply?
There's two ways to get ICC funds, and that is first of all, your house has to be, your structure has to be damaged by a flooding event. Your structure has to be in the FEMA MAP special flood hazard area. And you are declared substantially damaged by the floodplain administrator. So if you reach that mark of maybe 51% damaged, you would be eligible to apply for ICC funds. Or because you have repetitive loss definition in your ordinance, then if you are a repetitive loss, then if you've had more than one loss, then
within 10 years.
I believe that. I would have to look at your ordinance. Some communities adopt different things in their ordinance, but yes, it's usually within 10 years. Some communities adopt for the life of the structure.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Karen, for being with us today. We really do appreciate the additional information and for you sharing your contact information in case we have additional questions. So thanks again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good night.
Good night. Dr. Peoples, do I remember correctly that you're going to give us a brief update from the city perspective, or is that someone else? I just want to make note of the fact that Travis was referred to as a superhero, and on cue, he's wearing Batman sweatshirts.
He sure is.
So Mayor, I was going to give you a brief overview, but the superhero in the room is on standby to answer any specific council questions. And he certainly has been the boots on the ground and has talked with all the property owners and has a wealth of information. So big thanks to Travis, because it has not been easy work. Okay, so I'll just go through this pretty quickly. So as background and, for people who were unable to tune in to our previous council meeting with the flood update, on August 8th, 2022, President Biden declared a major disaster for several areas, which of course we were included. That disaster has to include storm damage from the weather events from July 25th to July 28th. So Webster Groves had 21 single-family homes, 2 were condo buildings with a total of 8 units, and 1 apartment complex with 16 units that were affected. There were also 4 commercial buildings that were affected. 6 homes and 1 commercial building were substantially damaged. The substantially damaged homes, the addresses are there. I won't read them, but that's been a question we've been asked several times. And of course, that's public information. So we wanted to share where those were located geographically. And then of course, and we have our FAQs online. I'll just share that for folks that are watching. And so please refer to those as well, because we are updating them as soon as we get new information in. But we're asked often, what does substantially damaged mean? And so that means that it's any structure that's been determined to be 50% or more damaged. Those structures are required by Federal Emergency Management, so by FEMA, to come into compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, which we just heard about. An owner's flood insurance or lack thereof is not considered when deciding because the property must be brought into compliance whether the owners have insurance or not. So there were also several properties that were very damaged, but they did not rise to the level of being categorized as substantially damaged. So those that were damaged to a lesser degree, there were 15 residential, 3 commercial, and you can see where the locations or names of them there. 1 apartment complex that had 16 units affected, and 2 condo buildings that had 8 total units, 4 per building. So if people have referred to the FAQs, and as council knows, and as we've talked about in the last meeting, that there is an option for buyouts that we're exploring. There's a lot of steps to the buyouts. We have to submit our notice of intent to SEMA. It then goes up to FEMA. But before then, we of course need to do our due diligence and talk about it, how we would go about that as a city if that is the determination that's made. So in order to do that, the first step for staff, and where Mr. Ham has really been incredibly helpful, was contacting each of those individuals, engaging their interest. So of the 6 substantially damaged homes, all of those homeowners have requested buyouts. Of the 15 not substantially damaged properties, 5 of those homeowners have requested buyouts. And so there is a hefty buyout process. The city pays fair market value for the property and structures. There's a licensed appraiser that would be hired by the city to determine that fair market value. The city then has to pay for the demolition and the closing cost as well. And then one of the main factors for consideration is that the land then must remain undeveloped. The deed is restricted, which ensures that it remains undeveloped. There are allowances for minor improvements, but those have to be approved, submitted and then approved to SEMA, or approved by SEMA, excuse me. And then there's an example there for you. A permeable parking lot or a community garden may be approved by SEMA since it would not increase the flood risk to neighboring properties, but an impervious parking lot would not be. So there's probably some needed conversations around that should council decide to move forward with buyouts if we were even approved by SEMA then FEMA. But what does that mean for that space and for the city moving forward? And then there's the financial implications for the city. And just a caveat that these are just estimates. Demolition costs are estimated to be $10,000 to $15,000 per structure. The appraisal costs are estimated to be $600 per structure. And then the closing costs are estimated to be $1,000 per structure. And those could increase or decrease. The city's cost to acquire homes, according to the current SEMA provided information, is there before you. And this is probably an area that Mr. Ham could speak to because the calculations have changed a couple of times and he can share with you how those have changed. But the latest information that we have is there before you. All affected homes are a little over $2 million. The substantially damaged homes would be a little over 500,000. And this is calculated at that 25% match that the city would have to put forward. And then the not substantially damaged homes at almost $600,000. So, and then of the homes currently requesting buyouts, we're at a little bit over $1 million.
So 25% is the best case scenario too, right?
That's correct, Councilman.
And that's 25% of the fair market value.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're looking at, I mean, even if we just look at the substantially damaged, best case scenario, the city's costs are looking at over 500K right now.
That's correct. And then I'll keep going back to it because I think it's very important to consider in the conversation. So certainly the minimum is that 500K, as well as then the land use decisions moving into the future, because those then effectively come off the tax rolls for lack of better words. And more than just the tax implications, it's where are we going with land use?
Yeah. But I mean, does this include the demolition cost, the closing cost, and the assessor's costs? I'm sorry, the appraisal costs?
I'd have to refer.
It does.
Yeah, Mr. Ham's coming forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yes. I was just trying to get my head around how much our costs would be from a city's perspective, best case scenario. And so it's already included in the substantially damaged.
That's correct.
Go ahead.
Yep.
And do we, so I'll ask you, I'll probably end up sending my question to Heidi, but do we have any sense, 75% match is the best case scenario. Do we have any sense of how often they meet 75 or it comes in under that, or do we know anything about that?
So all of our recent conversations with SEMA, I mean, they're pretty confident that it's going to be a 75-25.
Okay.
We just want to caution everybody because it is worded as up to 75%.
Okay, great.
Can it
Thank
be
you.
house by house? Like, in other words, like if 2 of the houses, they decide to pay 75%, the other 3, they decide to pay 50%.
That's an excellent question. I don't know. So we submit them as projects with 6 to 8 properties. And I think it's based on that project.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
I believe, Mayor, that was the last slide, Eric. Yeah. So that's the information that we wanted to share with each of you. If you have additional questions for Mr. Ham or myself, happy to answer them. If there's additional information you're interested in, we can try to gather it.
Thank you very much. I would just add to this, the other entity that we've been wanting to talk to is MSD. MSD will be with us on October 4th to talk about issues related to their projects and what may or may not help with some of these issues. And so, that's another aspect of this that we are currently exploring as well.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. I know this has been tedious.
So that was supposed to come in the remarks of visitors. Can we just go ahead and do it? Yes, please come on. If you will just state your name and address and hand that on over. Thank you.
I will. Thank you very much. I appreciate the accommodation. So my name is Don Lohman. I live at 810 East Pacific Avenue. My wife and I have lived in Webster Grove since 1994, and we've lived at 810 East Pacific Avenue since 2004. Our neighborhood was obviously very involved in the recent flooding, and I have a few things to point out. One is, first and foremost, the affected homeowners on East Pacific and North Forest are innocent victims of a changing floodplain due to climate change impacts, on the use of the nearby creek or creeks and creek adjacent property in other municipalities like Brentwood and their, Brentwood bound project. A clear acknowledgement of that fact should be made at the outset and remain front of mind when we're talking about the issue of buyouts. The change in the neighborhood was swift and severe. People who lived there since 1960 indicated that the 2008 flood was the very first one that they had experienced. And there've been a number of floods since 2008. Neighborhood has flooded at least 5 more times, including 3 times in a single 10-day period earlier this year, as everyone knows. Clearly, the floodplain has altered significantly over the years due to the above mentioned factors beyond the residents' control. And unlike those factors, the longtime existence of these homes played no role whatsoever in the changing floodplain. The homeowners did not cause the problem, and most of us have been there since before this kind of flooding was an issue, and obviously didn't choose to come to the nuisance of flooding. The city has options, as you all know. And the decision-making process should focus on a just result, for the homeowners based on the stated purpose of the Webster Groves ordinances. Buy out all, when one option is to buy out all flood-prone homes and have that have sustained repeated flood damage since September of 2008, or grant all affected homeowners and anyone they sell their homes to going forward a permanent variance from the burden of ordinances that make ownership of the homes too costly to bear and that render the homes frankly unsaleable. Although those folks still pay taxes based on the comparable values of those homes as if they were outside the floodplain, I might add. In fact, the variance should be granted to all homeowners in the floodplain regardless of buyout eligibility, because the burdensome requirements and restrictions on home repair and improvements are an exceptional hardship for homeowners that offer no benefit to the city of Webster Groves and have no impact whatsoever on flood risk. Doing nothing is not an option. Inaction further victimizes these homeowners by forcing them to live in flood-prone homes that they cannot afford to maintain or repair, but cannot sell, all because of the ordinances enacted by the same city that denied them a buyout, if that is the course of action that it chooses. Well, I will be back on October 4th then. I will say this, however, I understand the camaraderie and that happens, amongst city council members, but the superheroes here, not Travis. Superheroes are the people who have to put up with, and experience what they experienced this July. So I just ask you to be a little more judicious with the use of that term. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize if that comment offended you. That was insensitive on my part.
Can I ask you some questions? When did you purchase your home?
Purchased our home in 2004, and it was approved it was built. It was already built. It was built in 1999 and 2000, approved by the city of Webster Groves for building well after 1978.
All right. So when you purchased your home, were you aware that it was in a floodplain?
It was actually in a much reduced floodplain. Just the front tiny corner of it was in. And then when FEMA redid their map several years later, it not only put our entire house in a higher level of floodplain, it moved up the street into our neighbors. Now, there's been some discussion with Brentwood Bound. There's a letter into FEMA that shows that it will actually maybe return that map back to where it was when we originally bought the property. But my point is that, that has changed. And obviously those changes had nothing to do with anything that the homeowners did in that neighborhood whatsoever.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone's blaming the homeowners for any of this.
Correct.
When the floodplain changed, did your mortgage and insurance change?
I would have to check. I mean, if my recollection is that, when you move up a level, right, that it goes up substantially.
And did you this is a personal question, so I'm not going to ask it in public, but I guess the thing that we as a council and as a community have to struggle with on this issue is I don't know the whole history of where this floodplain came into existence and how it expanded. I've seen the maps now, but the question that we have to ask, I think, as a community, as a governmental body is, you bought in a floodplain. And so what is government's role when there is damage caused by something that was a known issue? And I don't know that answer. It's a philosophical
Bought in
question.
a floodplain. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, I mean, you did buy a home.
No, thy home was not in a
Sure,
floodplain.
and I'm
when I
not sorry, I'm
bought
not
it.
trying to argue with you, sir, I
Okay.
promise.
Well, then I want to make sure that if you're going to state facts, you state them correctly.
And that's completely fair, but understand what I'm trying to say is that on some of these, did any of those homes when it was purchased, well, and you might not know this answer, so, but were any of them already in a floodplain?
Yeah, and I don't think
And I
it's
don't know the
appropriate to ask him to answer that. I mean, that's a question for staff.
No, but no, I understand that, but like, do you understand the philosophical question that I'm posing?
I understand that it's a difficult
Yeah.
question. And frankly, her response, Karen McHugh's response on ordinances, I think, to say that variances aren't allowed and you'll be punished if you give them, and if you give variances in one instance, you have to give them in all of them. That's a ridiculous statement. Ordinances are fact specific and variances are fact specific. And the fact that we could be punished as a city, as residents, for utilizing the very language in ordinances that they dictate we have to have. I mean, that is ridiculous and indefensible, frankly.
Sure. And sir, I don't know what you're going through. I'll be the first to admit that, but I can.
Well, and it's not so much us, but a lot of our neighbors. Yes.
But I can empathize and I can try to understand. And I will say this, we had a mayor that was out there 3 days later, walking the ground, trying to understand what was going on. We've had a city staff that has been very committed to trying to understand that and give us as a council best information. We are trying to make a good decision here. And we're not just throwing homeowners to the side.
No,
We're trying to
I
do.
appreciate that.
And so I just want you to know that this council is working hard and the city staff is working hard to try to understand what can we do as a community and as a governmental body. We're not trying to delay or anything like that. We have, I think, learned more about floodplains in the past 3 meetings than any other topic this past year. So while I can't understand what you're going through, I certainly empathize, but I also want you to know as a resident of Webster Groves that this governmental body is attempting to try to find a resolution to the best possible recourse there is.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate being able to speak.
Thank you very much.
Ask a timing question. Dr. Peoples, you might know, or Travis, like, we've already submitted our projects, right? And then do we know when we expect to hear back from SEMA or FEMA if they've been accepted?
We have not submitted our projects yet. I believe they're due on the 23rd. Travis, correct me if that's wrong.
Correct. Yep.
So we're putting the final touches on those now. I reviewed one this evening, actually. So we're getting those together. They will be submitted. I do not know about the timeline. Mr. Ham?
So we turn them into SEMA on the 23rd. They go through them. We have not been told a timeline. We've been told it could be 3 to 6 months, or they could be fast tracked to be a little quicker than that. We won't know until they know. So.
Thank you. All right, I believe we are ready to move to number 3 in our new business. Council, Sarah, would you please call for the first and second reading of bill number 9197?
Sure. I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9197.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill 9197, first reading. Pardon me. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission Show Me Zero program for the purchase of speed warning traffic counters and motorcycle radar unit.
Any discussion? Second reading, please.
Bill 9197, second reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Show Me Zero program for the purchase of speed warning traffic counters and motorcycle radar units.
All right, Emily, do you have a motion for bill number 9198, please, first and second reading?
Yes, Karen, I'd like to make a motion for the adoption of bill number 9197.
Actually, we're going to do
Call for the
first and second reading of 9198.
Bill number
Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill 9198, first reading, an ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending chapter 4, boards and commissions, article 8, Charter Review Advisory Board, section 4.410, membership, and section 4.420, meetings and matters related thereto.
Any discussion? All right, second reading, please.
Bill 9198, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending chapter 4, boards and commissions, article 8, Charter Review Advisory Board, section 4.410, membership, and section 4.420, meetings and matters related thereto.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda or have a comment about it? Please go right ahead.
This is regarding resolution number 2022-46. About entering into an agreement with vertical publications.
And Emily, speak into the mic, please.
Your mic's off. Press the little button on the side.
Is that better, Emerson?
Yes, it is much better.
Okay, great. Helps when the mic is on. This is about resolution 2022-46, entering into an agreement with liturgical publications. I had a brief conversation with Jenny Starkey this morning and I'm comfortable with it, but I just wanted to share some of the things we talked about in case others had similar questions about it. One of the questions I had is liturgical publications does a lot of work with religious communities, but it is not a religious organization. It's its own entity that happens to work with religious organizations, and it's branching out into larger senior communities and also into municipalities. In the publications that Jenny has previewed, there's no religious information included, so that's great. This is all about trying to get a news, kind of like a printed newsletter out to the older residents in Webster. It would be 3 times a year, 5,000 copies. They would not be mailed. They would be kind of distributed to different communities and public buildings, and probably would start in February or March. We do have the option, like it's like a 6-month notice that we have to give them if we decide we don't want to do it. So it seems fairly low risk. It's no cost to us. They generate the ad revenue. They do the solicitation of the ads, and the ads all seem to be very appropriate for a newsletter like this. So I don't have any concerns, any remaining concerns, but just wanted to share that.
Thank you. And I think the goal here is, since we've moved from print publications to online, this is a way to reach seniors who are less often online with information about the city. Karen, would you like to call for the approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. In terms of appointments to boards and commissions, we have appointed Nicole Chaput, Kyle Klemth, Michael Yockley, Tammy Bem, Jennifer Finney, Joseph Dugan, Matthew Heil, Jeannie Kirkton, and John Eppers to the Charter Advisory Review Board, and Paul Dribbin and Melissa Johnson as alternates to that same board. We do have an executive closed session under number 1.
Mayor, I would like to close up. Call for an executive closed session related to attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, close parens.
Second.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.